dedicated to empowering you with information,
to make positive choices,
and be advocates for your overall well-being.
Welcome to The Health View. Welcome to The Health View. I'm Yvonne Dunetz, and today our topic is about MNRI, how it addresses stress, trauma, and developmental or learning challenges with both children and adults. My guest is Shannon Desilets. She is the program director of the Choose Love movement for the state of New Hampshire, working directly out of Governor Chris Sununu's office. In addition, she is an international MNRI core specialist and instructor, and it is this part of her journey which led to bringing Choose Love to New Hampshire. For the last 6.5, almost 7 years now, she has been providing post-trauma treatment in Newtown, Connecticut, following the Sandy Hook school shooting. While she continues to provide MNRI to the community of Newtown, Sandy Hook, on a regular basis, she is now also able to put her focus into the solution for prevention through the Choose Love movement in the state of New Hampshire, thanks to the governor's statewide initiative. MNRI has also become an extension program of the Choose Love movement as it addresses stress, trauma, as well as developmental or learning challenges that children or adults might experience. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you.
Let's start with what is MNRI?
Great. So MNRI, I know it's a mouthful. It stands for Masgutova, Neurosensory Motor Reflex Integration. So it was created by Dr. Svetlana Masgutova, brilliant woman, brilliant. And it really gets to the foundation of our development. So in my opinion, it is a gem of therapies, but that's also backed by research and evidence as well. So what it is in a nutshell, we are working with primary reflexes of the body. And one of the first reasons why we have our reflexes is for protection and survival. So when we go through stress or trauma, our reflexes come back in to serve us, but can remain kind of heightened or stuck.
Let's just clarify for our audience, what are reflexes?
So reflexes are given to us. We all have them by nature. When you talk about a reflex circuit per se, there's a specific sensory input zone that signals the brain, followed by a motor response. I know for many of us hearing reflexes, we might think about going into a doctor's office and they're doing the little hammer on the knee.
Exactly.
We're talking about the primary reflexes of the body that are given to us to help us in our development, but also to serve and protect us. So when you think about our freeze response or a fight or flight response under stress, those are some of these reflexes that we're talking about.
So when you say we're given to us, we're born with it.
Yes.
And so you were beginning to explain when I asked for that clarification about how it is used and how it helps people.
Yes. So like I said, it gets to the foundation of our function. So how this came to be, the roots are of the Masgutova method, or MNRI, are in post-trauma. That's how it all began. It later extended to help children or adults with special needs. I mean, really, at the end of the day, any one of us can benefit from this. I even have colleagues throughout the world. Some are even treating Olympians to optimize their performance. But the roots being in post-trauma, the story of how this came to be with working in Newtown is that I actually went to high school with friends of mine whose kids were inside Sandy Hook School. And when I learned that, I reached out and just said, this is what I'm doing now in life. It had been decades since I'd seen them. And explained to him about MNRI and how it can help us post-trauma. And long story short, they reached back out to me and said, we need you. I said, okay. So I gathered a team, including Dr. Masgutova and other therapists, national and international, and we went in to treat the community. We didn't know if we would be treating his family of 4, which still would have been beautiful in itself, but word of mouth spread. And we ended up doing 75 treatment sessions. And every time I organized a group, we did about 75 sessions.
And what does a session include?
So there, when you're working post-trauma, clients are laying on a massage table. It's a hands-on modality. It's not talk therapy, although they can talk if they wish. But it's really working through the body. So when our body undergoes stress or trauma and our reflexes come back to serve us, and when I say that, they can be kind of heightened, meaning think about, say, someone returning from war and they're startling at fireworks, for instance. Certain reflexes playing with that, and we help bring calmness back to the nervous system to help settle those responses down.
And when you say you help bring calmness back, how do you do that?
By working specific patterns of the body. So like I said before, there's a specific input zone that signals the brain, followed by a motor response. So it's hands-on therapy. Oftentimes, I'll tell you, a lot of clients fall asleep into a deep sleep on the table, and we're doing the work. The brain is still receiving that information. So we might be working a particular reflex where we're giving input that signal the brain, and then we take the body through the appropriate motor response for that certain reflex. I know it sounds a little confusing, but I think that the big thing to remember is that by doing this, we actually have research showing that this helps to regulate neurotransmitters in the brain, which is how nerve transmission happens. It calms down the nervous system. It helps improve stress resilience. So the next time someone goes through a traumatic event or stressful event, by bringing down the nervous system prior, the next time an event happens, the response won't be off the chart.
As heightened.
As heightened as it could be, yeah. And it helps to give us emotional regulation. It helps with cognitive processing. By bringing balance to those nerve pathways and to the nervous system.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. So we have one example, for instance, that I can show right here sitting at the table. For instance, we have a reflex known as our fear paralysis reflex. So this is our freeze response. To give you an example of witnessing this, there was one day our group was down in Newtown. We were in a restaurant for lunch. And an ambulance went by with sirens going. There was a table of women next to us and all went into this freeze. Most likely those are moms sitting at that table being brought back to that day.
Absolutely, and the memory, everything.
Yeah. So one technique that can be done with that for our fear paralysis is we actually will do these gentle tapping at specific points on the body in a cha-cha rhythm. And this helps bring down the response of that reflex. We do it at different points of the body.
Interesting. And so as you were working with the children at Sandy Hook, you also worked with adults too?
Yeah, so when we're down there, so as I said, we had a group of therapists initially. I believe a group of us went down about 6 times. Phenomenal group of therapists. And even though we ran out of funding on our end because it was all free for the community, their hearts continued on with me. So I have still continued to go between New Hampshire and Connecticut. I was the only local therapist. But we see children who ran, children who hid, parents who lost their children that day, grandparents, siblings, teachers, counselors, police, first responders, bus drivers. We see the entire community.
And how long does a treatment last?
Typically, a treatment will be an hour to an hour and a half. There are times where we might do longer than that. We might be limited and do shorter, but either way, people are receiving benefit for sure.
And how many treatments do they need to have in order to get their bodies back into equilibrium?
That's a very great question, and it can vary from person to person because where were they prior? Okay, so going into Newtown, close proximity to New York City, we also treated people that had been 9/11 affected, directly affected. So where were they before? Or when you think about our police or first responders on a daily basis, they're bombarded with these stressors. So it really depends on the individual. I can tell you, even the most profoundly affected from Sandy Hook shooting, so parents that lost a child or kids that hid, after one treatment, they came back and told us, I slept for the first time last night. Or children that needed to be with mom and dad sleeping at night were then sleeping in their beds alone. We had one dad, I'll never forget this man. He came in the next day after treatment. He goes, whatever you did yesterday, I couldn't believe it. I went to my doctor's after. He was being followed for severely high blood pressure. And the doctor's office took his blood pressure 3 times because none of them believed that had normalized. So those responses are pretty immediate, especially when you're working with someone that's otherwise neurotypical. The responses can be very quick. What you want is for stability to be there. So when I go down to Newtown, I continue. I'm there once or twice a month. But then again, with things that are happening in the world, I was just there this last weekend. That was just right after the shooting happened in California.
Right.
So they were traumatized from that, some of them, a lot of them. So unfortunately, the need does not go away, and the children's brains are processing the event a lot differently now, 6.5, almost 7 years later as well. So there are some that see me each time I'm there. There are some that pop in as they feel they need it.
Interesting. So you mentioned about tapping. It's different, though, than EFT
Right,
or
it is.
energy work like Reiki or anything like that.
Yes.
But it is focusing on specific areas, meridians in the body?
Not meridians, but these points that we do the fear paralysis reflex on is specific for that reflex.
Okay.
So Dr. Masgutova in her research has shown that these specific points are very important for the fear paralysis reflex.
And how long has this therapy been?
So it first started in the 80s. Dr. Masgutova, psychologist in Russia, there was a massive train wreck, and there were 2 trains on the track that day going opposite direction and a nearby gas leak.
Ooh.
Massive explosion. One of the carts was all children, gifted and talented children, and being brought on like a reward trip. And many did not survive. She went down to volunteer, and badly burned and traumatized children, and people are having a really hard time getting through to them. And she was sitting at her desk one night and tears in her eyes, and what are we going to do? And okay, we need to go back to the beginning. And it was a brain gym book that she had that triggered that thought, and we need to go back to the beginning. So she started, this is how this, plus just tons and tons of her research with well-known people in this area of work. And she started going in and doing, because they were so badly burned, they couldn't per se do these movements. But what she did is she would do the movements, and they would idiomaturgically, so by watching, take this in.
Right.
And doorways started opening. And there's a book called Trauma Recovery, You Are a Winner, that walks through this story. It's a short read, but it really gives the background of this that she did, and Pamela Curley, the co-founder for the U.S. Institute, wrote, that really takes you through this story. So the roots are post-trauma. So that was back in the 80s, I believe, 89, and then a few years later expanded into the U.S. She then moved to Poland. There's institutes in Poland and in the U.S.
Now, you're a physical therapist. How did you get connected with this? What got you interested in this?
So I was always that physical therapist that really, some of my traditional PT friends might kind of think I'm out of the box. So I really believed in furthering my education and other modalities that really was foundational. So I actually had become trained in craniosacral therapy, and I assistant taught for the Upledger Institute. And I was treating a girl who had multiple diagnoses. One was autism, and her mom brought her to me for cranio because she was seeing benefits from that. Mom happened to be an OT assistant, and so she herself had to take continuing ed courses. So she was the one, this was back in 07, 08, She said, Shannon, you have to meet Dr. Masgutova. This is so up your alley. So I listened to her and I went and I attended my first course with Dr. Svetlana Masgutova, and my jaw, I think, was on my lap, thinking, wow, this just makes so much sense. And this woman, first of all, is so brilliant, and her heart is so evident, but so brilliant and all backed by research. And I remember having the thought, with the exception of cranial, at that point I had been a PT for 11 years, and I remember having the thought, what have I been doing for 11 years? I have been teaching children to effectively compensate for challenges that they were facing. Was I helping them? Were they reaching goals? Absolutely. Was it being done in the most effective way for them? I don't believe so. This is where MNRI comes in, because this really gets to the foundation. So when you think about our reflexes, you can think about brainstem level up versus cortex level down.
Yes.
If we're going to do cortical training over and over and over again, but the body's response down at the brainstem it needs just simple help to get to that point of learning most efficiently and with more ease. We need to go there. We always use the analogy too in the Masgutova world. When you think about building a house, you don't start with the roof. You start at the foundation.
Yes.
To build that up.
So you've been doing this now for a number of years, and OTs also do this. They're trained in it.
OTs, speech language pathologists, is a huge correlation with speech and language. We have anybody from massage therapists, nurses, to so many people. It is becoming more well known. For a while, it was a very hidden gem. Yeah. And there's an extensive amount of training to become a core specialist and instructor, and we have a phenomenal team worldwide.
That's wonderful. So how would people seek out an MNRI therapist?
So you would go to the website. So it's masgutovamethod.com.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll put that on the screen.
We will have it.
And then once you're on that homepage, you can click down to find a certified practitioner near you and put in your area.
And are there different levels of certification? I know you're a master instructor.
I'm an instructor.
And core specialist.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And does that differ from other people that may provide the services?
Yes. So you don't need to be a core specialist to provide the treatment. One of the beautiful things for therapists is you can go to a class and this is right away, this is something you can take back and use with your clients. So there are people that simply have taken courses. There are also cores in training. So they're on the track to becoming core specialists, which is a high number of courses and exams and whatnot to reach core specialist level. And then after that, you're usually asked if you would like to become an instructor. So for me, I teach our PTSD course, I teach our school-based course, and I teach one called proprioceptive cognitive reflex integration. So there's different levels, but that's not to say if you have someone in your area that's not yet a core specialist, that person could still be very, very qualified to help. Absolutely.
Because of their background or whatever else, if they took a continuing education class, they could incorporate it and immediately begin to help people. They don't necessarily have to be certified in it in order to utilize this mode of therapy.
Right. I would hate to prevent someone from seeking. There could be an exceptional therapist that may not yet be a core specialist, but they are taking courses and doing as much as they can for that.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So from your perspective, as a PT and now as a core specialist, what do you believe the difference you've made and the most profound changes that you've seen in people because of this therapy?
I think what I will take with me for the rest of my life is the difference we've made in Sandy Hook. And we have a team of therapists that Sandy Hook is one traumatic event that teams of MNRI therapists responded to. We've also had victims of flooding down south. We've had other incidents, shooting incidences. We've had tsunami overseas. We've had people go in to help them as well. So even just being a part of someone's healing journey
Yes.
is something that I am so grateful for, and to be on this path. I am so grateful for meeting Dr. Masgutova. It changed the complete course of my work as a therapist from that day forward. One girl that comes to mind is little Sydney, who's not so little anymore. I've been seeing her on Facebook. She's growing up. But her mom brought her to me when she was a toddler. And Sydney had been born with a cancerous tumor on her spine. And at 9 days old, I believe it was 9 days old, she underwent surgery, but also started treatment for that cancer. When Mom wandered into the clinic where I was clinic director at the time, Sydney couldn't move from the waist down, and she was seeking a pediatric therapist. So I shared with her the modalities that I specialized in, and right away Mom said, yes, this is the way I want to go. And there's a little YouTube video of Sydney actually on online. But Sydney, to make a long story short, she is somebody I'm always going to remember. She later began walking. I attended her dance recital. Doctors had told Mom, you know, she'll probably be in a wheelchair her whole life, but she will survive. But Sydney has proven all that wrong. She's now in grade school as well, and cheerleading and whatnot, keeping up with her peers. So that is one of those stories.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and there's other, I mean, this therapy also hugely benefits people with autism. And some of the greatest teachers, I say teachers and I mean that, have been some of my clients with autism who otherwise might be nonverbal, but when you're working with them and providing MNRI, even if they are nonverbal, they may, in whatever mode of communication they have shared with us some of the most beautiful testimonies and how their body feels. And I feel like my body has now become alive. Thank you so much. So some of the greatest teachers, for sure.
Who else would benefit from this? So I know we talked about stress and
Yes.
trauma, but who else?
Absolutely. Stress, trauma, autism. We treat children with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, people with seizure disorders, ADD, ADHD, learning challenges, dyslexia, for instance.
Sensory processing issues?
Absolutely, sensory processing issues, because one of the main goals is self-regulation too. And when you're working with sensory processing issues, you're bringing clarity back, right? Clarity into the nervous system.
Exactly.
And so there's more balanced activity in those neural pathways.
Now, if we were to summarize, what's the most important information you'd want people to know about MNRI?
First and foremost, how to find a therapist.
And how do they find that
So
therapist?
you can go on that masgutovamethod.com website,
Yes.
and you can click down. I believe the wording is find a certified practitioner near you, and you type in your state.
Okay.
Also, there's great resources for parents. There's a parent guide to MNRI, which is a beautiful book walking you through every main reflex, why they're important, what you might see if they're not integrated appropriately, and there's how-tos.
You can purchase that online through that website. Wonderful. What else would you want them to know?
I definitely, the main thing is thank you for having me on here to help get the word out. It has been a gem, it's growing in awareness for sure, but getting the word out for people that this does exist. And the beauty of the work in itself is there's profoundness in the simplicity of it all. It's working with the very system we're all born with.
Which is wonderful. The website is?
masgutovamethod.com.
And so you were able to take this work and then apply it to children and adults in Sandy Hook.
Yeah,
And from that literally changed the trajectory of your life.
it sure did.
And so you've been going around helping people with not only MNRI therapy, but what else are you doing? Because that's a lot on your plate.
I feel very honored to be at this point in my journey.
Yes.
Being able to help in Newtown has been, I really don't have words for it.
Yeah.
But through that work,
Yes.
I was able to meet Scarlett Lewis,
Yeah.
who lost her son Jesse. Scarlett's been coming since day one of us being down there, receiving MNRI, and credits a lot of where she's at because of MNRI, helping her in her journey. But when I learned what her foundation was doing with the Jessie Lewis Choose Love movement, you can bet first and foremost, as a mom myself, I was bringing her to New Hampshire because, yes, I wanted this in my son's school. Long story short, about a year ago, March, I was able to introduce Scarlett to Governor Sununu and our First Lady, Valerie. And it was right around the time that he had his school safety preparedness task force writing the report. And in their words, of course we're going to do this. Why wouldn't we do this? If we can't put our children on a bus and feel safe at the end of the day, there's nothing more important than that. So for me personally, to still be helping people post-trauma, I go down, like I said, once or twice a month to Newtown. I still see people privately at my home as well. But now to put so much energy into a solution for prevention, to prevent such tragedy, is huge. I don't want to see a single person in New Hampshire go through what I've witnessed this community go through in Connecticut. So I am now program director for the Choose Love movement here in New Hampshire, and very happy that my two worlds have come together because MNRI is now an extension program under Choose Love. So I can go in and teach in the classroom certain movements to help in the classroom as well.
Oh, wonderful. So you're able to do that to give, counselors, teachers, a variety of other different people in school, staff, the opportunity to learn some basic tools that they can immediately incorporate.
Absolutely. Because when you think about children, right? So 20 years ago, there was the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experience Study, where 1 in 5 children were coming to school with some form of trauma. Updated studies now, depending what state you're in, 38 to 50% of children are coming to school with some form of trauma.
Yes.
When a child is in survival mode and operating mainly out of the brainstem, we then sit them down at a desk and we expect them to take information in through their cortex or appropriately access the emotional centers of the brain in a regulatory way. That doesn't necessarily happen. So by bringing this technique, another tool in the toolbox, into the classroom, we can help with all that. And when a child feels safe,
Yes.
and they're no longer operating in survival mode,
Exactly.
they're more prepared to learn.
Absolutely, no question about it. Well, I greatly appreciate all that you do. I'm so delighted that you were here. And please mention one more time the website.
MasgutovaMethod.com.
Thank you. Until next time.